Welcome back to another episode of RNT Fitness Radio, and today I'm joined again by Chris Knott, who first appeared on the podcast back in episode 16 and has come on again to share some golden nuggets. In today's episode, we talk about productivity, the art of staying pain-free, and how to train effectively for maximum gains in the gym. Chris is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited to hear what value you extract from this one afterwards. Cool. What's been going on then? Long time no speak.
Yeah, quite a lot really. Kind of changed the style and approach from last year. What was it? Last time we spoke was, I think the fasting podcast that we did.
Yeah, we did 2 fasting podcasts.
Yeah. So went down the route of doing the education thing. That was fun. Doing the seminars and delivering. That was through kind of 2018. Got to that kind of crossroads as a trainer in late 2018, thinking, what do I do? Where do I go from here? Like probably you did just before setting up RNT. It wasn't necessarily the hours or anything, but it's like, long term, 5-10 years, what we'd be doing. And then kind of realized myself that I wanted to go back into education, but almost something a little bit more to retrain. So I was really tempted, obviously, as you'll know, really, really tempted actually to go down looking into neuroscience. That was actually a degree that I fancied. But then it was like job prospects, lab time investment, considering what I'd come out with wasn't too practical. So made the decision back in January, February to apply for osteopathy and start that in later this year. So
very nice. And where are you doing that?
It's going to be at the University of Derby. So it was... It's a 4-year degree, which is flexible. It's flexible hours, but it'll allow me to still PT in person and treat people. Back in January, February time, got into doing medical acupuncture, which is basically dry needling. Started to do that on top of personal training. Really enjoyed that, and just getting further into it. And as it will reflect, obviously, in the social media content they put out, it's obviously a lot more therapeutic treatment based as well as exercise and whatnot. So yeah.
Well, one thing you put out pretty timely, actually, it was yesterday. You put something up about whether personal training and physical therapy is the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that the sort of route you're sort of trying to find, that middle ground, grey area between the two fields?
Yeah, I mean, it's opening a can of worms, and it's just as a kind of thought process, because we can talk about this later on. But I've actually written a book, and it's on. It's nothing to do with health and fitness, but it's for personal trainers, and it's all about business, but not business in a sense of like how to make money. Even though it's indirectly, it's more business in a sense of just how to run a personal trainer business, like the education that you don't get. And it's not necessarily these systems are bulletproof and amazing. It's just my personal experience. So it's like semi-autobiographical. And it was just more so, whilst I was doing it, I was doing a few chapters on validating how much you charge. And it's really difficult because I think that personal trainers themselves get undervalued due to the fact that it's so easy to get qualified. So obviously, like if someone said to you, right, I want a one-to-one personal training session tomorrow, and they said, I want you to take me for one, and you told them how much you'd have to charge, which I'd roughly guess is going to be pushing 3 figures. Would you not agree? Yeah,
of course. Yeah, easily.
Exactly. So, you've done that because of the years of experience you've had, and that kind of backlog of courses you've done, experience, hours and hours and hours of intense study, and that's why you charge that. But there is nothing that actually separates you in terms of qualifications on paper than a guy who's just done a 6-week course. So my kind of opinion is that for personal trainers to be a better career path and actually a legitimate one where people can be taken seriously, being a degree would probably justify that. So, yeah.
Doing a degree in what? Anything?
No, as in like personal training becoming a degrrie.
Oh, a degree. Oh, it's in personal training becoming a degree.
Yeah. Because when I was at school, I thought it was. I thought you actually had to do. I thought the only way you could be a personal trainer is if you did sports science. which is what I did. I didn't realise.
It can be anyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is this? So when did you start this book? What's the process of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I said before about productivity, and it was, I've just finished the initial draft. I started it back in February, and the initial draft is done, and I hit my target, which was 100,000 words. So wow. I kind of had this figure in my head, which is initially 80. I said I was going to write from the beginning of February to the end of July. And last week it tipped the scales at 100, which sounds great, but now I've got to fucking read through 100,000 words and edit it again. So I've created a rod for my own back there. So I started that, got into a routine, used all the stuff that I've spoken about on the podcast before, just all those things. If you want to discuss it further, we can do. And lo and behold, it was a very natural process. And I found that, 6 months there it was. And now it's going to go into print, and I'm self-published via Amazon Kindle. It's called KDP. So going down that route, because finding a publisher, I'm not really doing that. The fact that it's so, the world is so much entrepreneurial nowadays. If you've got the content, you can get it out there.
What was the process of writing it? Because obviously 100,000 words is no easy feat. Did you map out a skeleton, or did you just do it by flow? Because there's two types of writers you get, right? You get the ones who map out everything and spend more time sharpening the axe than actually chopping the tree. And then you got the other that just chops and sees what happens. This
was just chop, 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 like everything. It was like, so basically it was indirectly. I did a podcast, which was just a solo one for my podcast back in January. And it was kind of a feeler to see how many actually interactive listeners I had, because despite having some pretty decent guests on, my podcast still is I consider it relatively unknown. So I said in this business one back in January, I was like, right, if you're a personal trainer and you want to become a better trainer, you need to do this, this, and this. They're my top 3 tips. And then I put at the end of that podcast, if you would like to learn more, add me on Facebook, ask to join this group, and get a group of PTs together. And I think from the podcast alone, I think about 5 or 6 people contacted me. And I was just like saying, look, I'm going to give you all these things. I'm going to give you all of it. And I think it got more interaction from putting it up through Instagram, saying, oh, by the way, there's this group going. I had a bit more bites through that. And long story short, it got to about 40 members. Quite quick within the first month or so, and then dribs and drabs, people would get in touch like, oh, can I be part of this group? I was like, yeah. So I actually had no intention at the time of writing this book, but I just thought, right, I've got this audience here, and I'll put up an article. So it turned into a blog. Then there was getting interaction. So the cool thing about this book is that it's already been read by about 60 people, but in real time. So then at the end of each week, I'd say on a Friday, right, what does everybody want to know about? And then people would comment, and there you go. That was my content, and it was just amazing. I'm sure you could do the same. It was like they'd ask me about something, and I'd be like, oh, there was that time in 2011 when this happened in the gym at this time, and then there was that time, and it was funny because the great thing is it became anecdotal, but then it was like how I had to deal with it. So it was a very fun process, and I'd literally be walking to work, and I'd think of something. I had the rule where I'd write. I just said 5 days a week, 1,000 words a day. That's it. It was as simple as that. It was just as simple as that. 1,000 words every time I sit down. It was on my commute to work, and 5,000 words a week, and then over 20 weeks, so it was.
Brilliant. And what's it going to be called?
I have no idea. I have no idea. The thing is, it's like the PT Bible is a bit too much for me. It's not like that. I literally have no idea at the moment. Couldn't tell you right now. It's something I need to think of, because I don't want it to be too brash and in your face. And the things that the people were going not crazy for, but the things that trainers were commenting, saying, I'm so glad you wrote that, is when I was sharing experiences in the terms of that made me a lot more human. Because I think that the issue with some of the industry leaders, and this isn't me having a go whatsoever, but they're just not too relatable for their audience.
Not anymore, right?
No. Like, if I say the top 5, which I'm not going to name, but you know who falls into that category. If you're a trainer who's just qualified, if they're here and you're there, you are, on a different spectrum. And I think that obviously working in a very good facility like I do, and putting out regular content, I'd like to say I've improved my stature as a trainer, but I think what these people really appreciated when I said, look, I've struggled so much with this and that and self-doubt and and financially 100%. But one thing I could hold my hands up is I said, look, you're not gonna, here's a little fact, because I worked it out, is that you have to do 25 sessions a week, 48 weeks a year at 850 quid an hour if you want to be a millionaire being a personal trainer per year. So that's £850 an hour, 25 sessions a week, 48 weeks of the year if you want to break a million. So I said, look, guys, if you want to be a millionaire,
don't be a PT.
Don't be a PT. But what I did say is that I actually have financial records that show that my earnings from 2014 to 2018 did double. So I was like, look, I've got to a decent level. I don't want to brag. I've never ever put anything about my personal life online, but I'm just saying is I have done that, and I can say that. I think it's like
I think you're just being a relatable PT. I think it's that middle ground where it's not like so far in the distance, which is separated by 25 years of experience, years and years, and being in the right place at the right time, as opposed to yourself, who's done obviously very well, but someone can aspire to and relate to.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that I think the biggest taboo in the industry for trainers is money. That's the biggest frustration. It 100% is, because ultimately it's in any walk of life, it's what's going to frustrate everyone. But on a PT course, I mean, all due respect, it was probably quite a while for both of us. But did you remember doing any kind of business acumen on yours? No. It's just figure it out.
I had my course about 10 years ago, and there was nothing there.
No, and the fact that they're getting even more brief. Mine was actually 10 years ago this month, and it was a 7-week course, and we literally didn't nothing at all. And it's why in my opinion it's seen as like a juvenile job, like vocation. I think it's why it's seen so like there's not as much respect for it. And that's why it is actually what has ultimately led to me wanting to do a degree and actually retrain as an osteopath, because say someone knocks on the door and it's a Man United player and they say, right, they want to work with you because we like what you're putting out. If you actually went to the club would be like, what's your actual qualification? You say, oh, I'm a personal trainer. They're just going to be like, well, fuck off. In my opinion. So it's like, how do you take yourself to that world-class level? It's like, well, yeah.
You mentioned all these different struggles that you've been through. What has been your number one biggest struggle as a trainer?
I think 100% confusion and finding your identity, as in like there's so many different paths you can go down. And I think for someone like yourself who's absolutely nailed their niche and market, you probably will go back to say, well, am I a strength coach? Am I a power lifter? Am I a body comp coach? And then that overwhelming pressure where I think that we all have this deep-rooted kind of passion for one area, which I think yours deep down was strength training at one point.
Yeah, it was.
But then it's not sexy enough to make any money, because strength and conditioning coaches isn't really, it has to be an aesthetically pleasing result, that you have to view it from a visual perspective as the world's getting more visual. So I said definitely identifying myself as like what am I as a trainer, what's my favorite method of training, and validating charging more, which I think is the biggest. I talk about this a lot in the book, which is like, how much can I charge, and not being scared to ask for it. Because it's weird when throughout my career, if I've consulted with people and they said, look, it's £200 for hour, I'd pay it straight away. But then I've got that knowledge, and then when I asked for money off people, increase my rates, I felt really guilty about it. And I think that the most ironic thing is that people who get into healthcare or the fitness industry, they say, I want to help people. But then because you've got that empathy towards them and you want to help them, you then have that thing where you're like, well, if I'm trying to help them, I can't take more of their money because that makes me a bad person. Like, well, it's got nothing to do with that. You need to separate yourself emotionally from business and that personal connection. And then obviously it's funny because our paths have indirectly crossed over the years on different courses. I was spent, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, probably that kinetic chain enhancement course out in Marbella probably set me back about $5,000, which was
Yeah.
In terms of flights, accommodation, the course, the food. And I was still charging like 30, 35 quid in a warehouse in Stockport, which is like, after doing that course. And then it's the thing that makes me laugh is that from a common sense point of view is that you're like, no, in no other business would anyone ever do that. If you think about it, like, when would any businessman in any other form of, trade invest ridiculous amounts of their annual income? So for example, I was not earning 50 grand a year at the time. So that was way more than 10%. So let's say I was earning 25 grand a year at that time. That's 20% of my annual revenue going on a course which didn't allow me to actually earn more money. And this is the thing that you just do as a personal trainer. You completely forget that you're doing it because you want to learn more. But when you actually look at your stats, you're like, holy shit, this doesn't make sense. But I did it for years.
Yeah. There's that guilt that many personal trainers have, and they struggle to get out of it.
But and it's weird because I think that the trainers who, I don't like saying like, oh, there's trainers who give other trainers a bad name. That's not my kind of angle. But let's just say there's trainers who aren't as well qualified or knowledgeable. Really, if you think of quality, if you went and got a secondhand, whatever, golf, I'll say golf because I've had a golf before, from 10 years ago, you'd pay a different amount if you got a brand new Mercedes straight off the line because you can differentiate between the quality. If you pay like 3 grand for one and then 90 grand for the other, you say, well, yeah, there's a clear difference because there's a clear difference in quality. Why is it that some PTs are coming out and charging 30, 40 pounds straight off the bat, yet insanely clever PTs struggle to charge 60 or 80? It's like, they're probably worth way more than that. But then it's because you've got to kind of validate what is the correct amount to pay, which is based on your demographic, it's based on your gym, it's based on, your own self-worth as well. So, yeah.
So you're targeting the book at the new, fresh out of the course PT, or is it more the stuck in the rut, been PTing for 5 years but still hasn't made any progress sort of person?
I think it would be useful for everyone across the board, and there's certain aspects which will probably resonate. And I've done it where it's kind of like an even mix, where it's like it's applicable for everyone in terms of like productivity, time management, social media content. Then there's the what to do. There's sections, and I'll actually write as like, with T Nation, the whole thing is reading time 5 to 7 minutes targeted. Yeah. I actually put in some of them. This is aimed at people in this to this section, as in 0 to 3 years. You need this is because it's this, and this. And then the number one thing I say to people who are just starting off is like, you've got to leave your ego at the door, get your hands dirty, and you actually have to do the time, because I think that's the biggest issue is that jumping the gun too soon. It's like, no. Don't get me wrong. Without sounding like a prick, I'm at the stage now where I need to advance my career and need to think about scheduling and need to think about increasing my rates. If you just qualified, the biggest thing you need to do is train a ton of people and, actually get that experience. Don't ever try and skip that.
Time and miles.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's the worry for me is that, I don't think it's going to be long until there's an online training only course where you don't actually, it'll be a certification in become an online personal trainer before you've actually even been a personal trainer. I don't think that's going to be far off. But the reason why you've built an incredibly successful business is because it's on the back of crazy amounts of hours in the gym. So if someone says to you, Akash, I can't connect with this chest press, and they say blah, 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 you can go on a recall and go, oh yeah, well you need to do this, this, and this. If you don't have that, you can't do it. So
yeah, you need to be able to give about 3 to 5 different cues, or to do the same thing. How do you get someone? They say you're reviewing a lat pull down, and their shoulders are rounded. Well, if you haven't been on the floor, you're not going to know what to say. One thing might work, 4 others won't work, but you won't know unless you've been through it.
Yeah, and the textbook lies a lot, like, functional anatomy textbooks, and even like the really good ones. Obviously, you'll have a good idea of ideals, so you've had a good concept of ideals, but you have to have that recall. And the biggest thing is interaction as well, is the actual human interaction, that like the skill based of creating a community and knowing how to interact. So I think that, I know we're digressing a little bit, but for anybody who would want to create a successful online business, that has to come off the back of hours in a one-to-one circumstance. I'm not just saying that because that's what you did, but I do agree is that you can't just skip the boat and go straight in unless you haven't had that. And I do also think that the more you've struggled, the greater the desire is to create a better circumstances. So,
Sure.
Better, lifestyle management and whatnot.
If we go into one of your favorite topics, I know we spoke about it before, but productivity. What's your latest hacks that you've been using ever since we last spoke? Last time we had a lot of people getting into binaural beats. You turned me. You're the one that turned me onto them. What are you doing nowadays?
High performance planner. I don't know if you've heard of that one. I just kind of buy that for one-to-one clients. I buy that for people. Just say, look, it's one of them where it's based on scientific review. I can't remember. In fact, if you don't mind me, I'll get the guy's name just so you're aware of it. But it's the high performance planner is just basically a diary. But it said that the questions it asks you every day are based around giving you not just a better productivity, but and also a better sense of well-being and purpose. And the questions it asks you on a daily basis are really like thought-provoking. So I noticed that, right, so I've got it, high performance, higher, so filling that in every day because it asks you to, by Brendan, I don't know if it's Burchard, so it's the high performance planner, Brendan Burchard.
Okay.
And that planner itself, I think I got it earlier in the year, and it basically, you fill it in the morning, you fill it in the evening, you put your day there, and it just asks you a load of questions, which isn't necessarily to do with productivity, but it's just like, who can you be valuable today? How do you want to feel today? What's the task that could be potentially difficult today? And the thing, the routine that I got into was wake up, eat straight away just because I was hungry, meditate for 10 minutes, do the diary and review it. And it's because that clarity you get just after meditating, that I thought, right, what is actually a tricky thing today? What actually could be a slip up? What's a good way to spend my time? And so that would definitely be one, just because it maps it out. It gives you that blueprint. So that planner helped. Meditation as well is just like, it's just, if anybody who wants to be more productive, don't even think about, spending money on nootropics or brain health stuff or anything that supplement wise until you've got a regular meditation routine. Because for me, that disconnection is so important, and it's why that post you said about social media and phones and electronics was so powerful, is because I really do think that need to disconnect is something that's so important. Just being completely able to quieten your mind. I'd say that high performance planner, do the meditation, and breaking your day down into times when you work, times where you don't. So like maximizing when you want to be creative, when you can create content. Like we said, we've done that one before. Creating content, taking in content, learning, and not forcing anything. So, for example, if I hadn't done my 1,000 words for the day, I would never sit down at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening and write it, because pretty much at 7 o'clock, that's when, right, turn my phone off, turn my laptop off, downtime.
We're so similar.
Yeah. It's literally like, I don't care if it's not. It's Dave Tate. It's Dave Tate's thing. Is this like, if it wasn't that important to do that day, then you don't do it. I think he said that. I don't know if it was on yours or not, but I definitely heard him say it, where it's like, if it was that important that it needs to be done, it get done. But if it's seldom. I'm trying to think if there has been a case where I've been on my laptop past 9 o'clock. That's very rare. It's only.
I've made a rule now. I've made a rule now that past 7 p.m. I'm off.
Yeah, everything.
Because otherwise, I was just carrying on until I slept, and there was no boundaries. So I've just made a rule. As soon as I start eating dinner, it's all off for the day. And so far in 2 months, so we're end of July now. In 2 months, I've only broken it once. So I'm pretty happy with that, and it's made a huge difference in just how I feel, my stress levels, my sleep, everything.
Yeah, I think it's just so underrated, and I spoke about it a lot. And it's like screen time. Like if I always had somebody right here now, and they said, right, give me your best tips on productivity. I said, right, well, give me your phone, and I go into the settings and say, what's your screen time? And if it's anything over 2 hours, they'd be like, well, where's your first problem? You don't really need to be on your phone more than 2 hours a day. Like, and even in that, I'm sure you can get it to an hour. And, you know, I try to get, and I know when I'm not being as productive as I can, because that increases, because you're either not, you know, because I still do quite a decent volume of one-to-one PT. So if I'm on the gym floor, then I won't touch it. You know, it's in my bag. It's not even in the vicinity. But I think the hard thing is trying to grow an online business, which obviously, you know, which I kind of do, because I do have like a side business which is growing quite well, is that you have to invest a certain amount in social media, a certain amount of time on your phone, but it can become consuming to the point where it becomes counterproductive because it's...
See, I think it's also a myth though, in that you always have to be on it. I think you can still have a presence without always being on your phone. Like, you can easily write your posts in advance, just block out two, three times a day to go check in DMs and do your stories if you want. But I don't think it needs to be something you're on it all day long with Instagram or Facebook just to be able to build an online presence. I think that's overrated. And I think it comes out insecure as well if you're always just hammering it just to try and stay relevant there. No, ultimately, if you're always on it, your creativity is going to get zapped.
And I do think it's like, it's not that I'm disagreeing or agreeing with that one, but I think for me, what was my biggest concern was that, you know, we had, when we started the online company, we had the foundations which were solid. Like, the product itself was solid. Like, we knew that, and my business partner Jay, we were like, And the first few months, it was like, not that it was slow, but it just wasn't taking off like we thought. And we thought the answer was more time on social media. So it was like, I think you're right, 100% out of insecurity. And that for me kind of like led me to break my own rules. But when it was literally through that stage, and you put that post up where it was like, you know, about the phone usage and everything like that, and it's when I took a step back, it's like, no, sometimes you just need to realize that organic is the best way forward, and again, just getting that level of disconnection. And I said this the other day, I think it was just in a blog post or maybe even in one of the book chapters, is I am very wary of certain people who are online constantly messaging. They have like 1,000 comments to interact with everyone, because it's important to reply to someone. You never want to be rude, but it kind of makes you think, is the only thing they do is use social media? Because I know for a fact the amount of like check-ins and work you'll have to do, it's something that you don't even bother with because you don't have time to do it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go on social media until 11 a.m. and then I check it at 11 a.m. and then I'll check it around 3-ish. And then where I struggle with is after dinner, is when I finish work and I'm like, you know, your willpower's zapped, and that's when I struggle with it. During the day, I'm fine. I don't really go on it much, but it's when the willpower's just gone. And you know, the whole decision fatigue kicks in, and that's when I'm on my phone the most. But during the day, it's actually it's okay.
But that's the thing where it's like, it's very blurred lines, because it's actually to an extent relaxing. And there's certain people who I follow and their content is brilliant, and it's like, it's absolutely brilliant. I actually sit down and it's enjoyable to read and think, oh, that was a great post, that was a great video, that was educational because I understand the context in which that could be used. So it's definitely has a purpose, which is great. But it's also, I think that, and I generally would say this, and it's why the neuroscience degree kind of appealed to me, but again, probably was a little bit too in-depth, is that it's 100% changing people's minds, like as in like 100%. Physically. You can't deny that. You cannot deny that. And it is just like, I think now that social media now is the equivalent of what fast food was in the 70s and 80s, where it started like kind of innocuous, and then it's going to rise to an epidemic. Then it's going to become socially acceptable for, like, you know, obesity, like where people are having, basically the equivalent will be like, you know, 10, 12 hours a day where people are using it.
ADD.
ADHD. Well, this is the thing. That's exactly it. Is that if you wonder why kids can't concentrate now, and they're like, why is my kid so angry? Why is my kid like not be able to concentrate for 5 seconds? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's like if you said, with all due respect, why is my kid so fat? It's like, well, what are you feeding them? Well, maybe look at the diet. It says, well, why is my kid angry and can't concentrate? It's like, well, how much time are they spending on these things? And it's funny because obviously we do the post for FLF, and I haven't written this one yet, and I don't know when this will go live, and whether I write it or not. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek one, but it's quite kind of funny, the analogy. And I just wanted to send on social media just a picture of a big cow eating grass, and I just wanted the caption to be, "Do you think cows get bored?" And it was like, obviously it's thought provoking, but I just thought people might read it just out of pure curiosity. And I was saying, and it came to me like when I was driving and we're going through a field, and I was like, and what I mean by that is your level of which you can get distracted is proportional to the level of the options that you think are available. So if you have an infinite amount of options available in the form of the internet, social media, Netflix, YouTube, and WhatsApp, because you could text friends and start a conversation, that is always going to be the thing that is going to hinder the task that you need to get done, because you have got that to compete against.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a cow who walks around the field, you can eat some grass, walk to the side of the field, take a shit, walk to the side of the field. Like, it probably doesn't get bored. Animals can't get bored because they have no concept of anything else, because there's not that selection. And I was saying that the thing about meditation and the thing about disconnecting from your phone is so important is because it allows you to reset that pool, like cleanse everything. Just the excitement in your brain goes down. And that's what I said is that, number one rule for productivity, or tip for productivity, is meditate to cleanse the brain, but just limit the time that you're exposing yourself to hyperstimulation. So.
What's interesting is all the senior execs at all these social media companies, they don't let their children near it.
Oh God, yeah, no, 100%.
And what the funny thing is the rise of social media is directly linked to when they IPO'd. So when all these companies, when Facebook IPO'd, they realized that they needed to make a lot of money, and that was done through ads. So they had to make it more addictive. So all the coding was driven towards making it as addictive as possible, and it coincided with the IPO, which is obviously when their revenues went through the roof. But it's all linked to that, and in Silicon Valley, none of their kids use it.
No.
They know how damaging it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if because obviously you're well connected, you got a lot of people, and if there was a neuroscientist out there who listened to this and could turn around and say, no, you're wrong. Here's how the brain actually works, because I study it and I got a PhD in it, and they could say, no, it's actually absolutely fine. There's no issues. I'll hold my hands up and be like, yeah, okay, I was wrong. That's fine with me. But in my opinion, no. Like any of my kids, it's like you're 18, and when you have it, when you want to create an account, you're 18, and if they turn around and they will kick off about it, like, that's not fair. I don't care. It's like, I pay the phone bill, and just take your phone off. Because I was even contemplating that. Do you give kids a smartphone? Do you just get them a Nokia and then say, right, at 7 o'clock, everybody's phone in the house goes in the box, and that's it. So not only are you not on your phone, but I'll not be on my phone either.
Is that what you do at your home?
Yeah. Well, no, it's not. This because my daughter doesn't have a phone. She's 6, so it doesn't really. I wouldn't even consider that until, I don't know, what age do you? Because I think I had a Nokia 3310 when I was about 11. I don't know if you, but that was just purely to contact your parents. I don't know. But yeah,
exactly the same.
Yeah. So it's one of them. Like but in terms of a smartphone, and that exposure, no, it's not something I'd consider. I do believe that.
Let's switch gears and talk more about what you're doing at the moment in your work, because you've also been through a bit of a journey. You talked earlier about your identity. You're finding your identity as being one of the biggest things, and I think over the last year you've really nailed it into where you specialize in, and it's that mesh between movement, fixing people, but also making them aesthetically better, and it's meshing all three of them or two of them together to get amazing results. What drove that drive, and how do you work with your clients now that's different to, say, a year ago or 2 years ago?
All right, yeah, that's an awesome question. So it stemmed from, I'd say the turning point was when I last competed in a strongman competition was last April 2018, and I did this comp and I prepped for it and I loved it, and like you, I can't imagine you're going on stage anytime soon again, or no, yeah. So, but the prepping for anything is enjoyable. Like having a goal and working your nuts off and just being so driven towards it. I loved it, and I do miss it because I've competed not that many times, but enough to know the process pretty well. And I was prepping for that show, and it was fun because that event, because it was fun because my friend Dan Reeve, I don't know if you know him, phenomenal coach, and he's a great guy. He was doing the same one in the category below me, so we were training for similar events, and I love that. And then went on the day, just really enjoyed it, hit some nice numbers, but then didn't qualify for the Englands. But I just had a great time, really enjoyed the day. But then went into my training after and noticed I had this recurring like hamstring injury. Oh, not hamstring injury. This really like pain in my glute, and I was I was squatting 180, 190 on a regular basis, like on a weekly basis, and this pain was getting worse and worse. It was like a really sharp pain in my glute, and then persisted with that, and just kind of hoped it would go away. Like as you do, that whole thing of it'll go away fine. And did my research and it's like, okay, it's something called a hamstring tendinopathy. And then you dig a little bit deeper and how to fix it and everything, and basically, well, why is it a tendinopathy issue, or what is causing that hip to rotate? Basically, what was happening is that I had instability in my lumbar pelvis, which is causing my hips to kick to the right. On any type of hinge pattern or any type of squat pattern. So, it's not great for strongman. That was giving me SI irritation in the right side. But the way, this is what I think is fascinating about the human body. The way my body was combating that is that obviously you can see is that my hips were going that way. Muscles on this side of the body were trying to pull it the other way. And they just happened to be in the form of the hamstring. So that hamstring and that instability around the different sides of the hips was pulling it this way every time I lifted. And anyway, long story short, I really pulled back my training, going back to basics and just focusing on the bar movement, and just really no ego, not putting my lifts on social media anymore, not being attached to numbers. Started from the basics again, built up, got back to some decent numbers, getting up to 180, 190 kilo deadlifts again, and it came back. It's like, okay, so that was I'd say 6 to 8 months of real meticulous raw lifting, no belt, no straps, just really focusing on it. And then I had to go back to the deep stemming issue, which was a lack of basic spinal stability. And then I came across the concept of this thing called DNS, which is dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, and that was how we breathe and properly engage in the core musculature in the spine. Then when I was highlighted that, I was like, oh my God, I can't even do that. And this is me who's competed in strongman, who's like been training people. Like, I like to think I know what I'm doing in the gym. And when I was put into the positions where you can't compensate through either whatever you want to call it, through your traps, through your lower back, through your lumbar, because you have very, very typical escape routes, which is the upper traps like thoracic area and the spinal erectus to the lower back. As soon as you correct someone and put them in perfect neutral spine, that's when everything starts to work. Once you then breathe correctly and start to actually inflate the core musculature to stabilize the spine, that's where the magic happens. That's when you see how actually strong you are. And I wasn't very strong. And then that was like root cause, going back to that. So it was just stripping away, and then thinking to myself, well, do I want to be lifting in 20, 30 years time? I was like, yeah, I do. I do. I want to be physically fit and active and move well for the rest of my life. And then it just unraveled and coincided with going down more treatment. But I was very, very fortunate in the fact that because of where I work, I got to have these science projector clients who were like, because bodybuilding shows what like the ultimate impact of weightlifting has on the body. And I worked with some very, very good bodybuilders, and it was just like seeing how the body adapts and how it moves. And the impact that training has on the muscular system and everything. It was really cool. So that was really the process of trying to find the answers for myself, and then digging deeper, deeper into it. And then it just said, well, what's the best route from here? I was like, right, I'll go down the osteopathy route. And then I listened to that podcast. I'm really sorry, I can't remember the guy's name.
Dan Baines.
Yeah, and I love that one. I was just like, yeah, it's such a natural progression. But then, fuck, this is the most amazing thing about the human body and health and fitness and anything, is that as soon as you start to dig deeper, then you realize I haven't even scratched the surface. Because then, Dan was talking about the crosses and the straight lines, the parallel lines in the cross. I was then fortunate to have a posturologist on my podcast, and she was talking about brain imbalances, and then that was talking about the vestibular system, which is how we position our body in space, which then went back to a brain imbalance, which came from ADHD, which took me to autism, which took me to smartphone usage. So it was like, I literally just wrote a post about it, about, you and I have been there, like, retract your shoulder, do a trap 3 raise, and that's how you get balanced shoulders, and doing, step ups and everything, and that's how we get balanced body. And actually, when you really dig deep, it's actually, everything is neurological. So it's what we do on it. So it's diet, it's habits, it's smartphone usage, and so yeah.
Interesting. So you're gonna try and mesh osteopathy into personal training. Is that the goal?
Kind of.
Are you going to go separate with both?
Kind of. The osteopathy is because physio is great, but I just wanted the ability to study the spine more, because obviously, like, if you're going to look into the brain, it'd be naive to look into the spinal column. The only issue is that chiropractic is a little bit too rigid in terms of spinal adjustment. And I did a podcast recently, a solo one, where I was speaking. I was just saying that the actual answer is that physio, chiropractic, any type of treatment therapy works, but it's the movement pattern dysfunction which is the problem. You have to address the movement. And I just want, I just want personal trainers to have a full understanding of what's going on, because ultimately, I'll say this. I'm happy to say this, because it never really damaged someone. But I'd say that earlier on in my career, things that I would have done as a trainer probably were borderline unsafe, but not through any type of malice. But for example, loading someone in a squat or a deadlift, and I've just had this conversation literally just now, is just like loading someone in a compound movement who sits at a desk all day because you heard from this or that person it's the right thing to do, is probably not advisable. So my goal would be to look from an osteopathic understanding of human structure and get people to move properly, and mashing that with the strength and conditioning side, which is knowing your angles, your machine setups, how to load someone, and that type of thing. So it's functional anatomy meets therapy meets training knowledge, which is being very much popularized now. And I initially was very, very dismissive of it. When I started seeing people using like cuffs and bands and chains and everything, I was like, oh, all right, nice one. Yeah. Because I was very much like, oh, you just need to squat and deadlift. And that was actually quite recently. But then when you actually do your homework into it and look into it, there's some absolutely fascinating physics which shows why that stuff it's 10 times better than a bench press. Why, if you look at it you can't actually argue with the science. So, yeah.
Very interesting. What, from this new lens that you've developed, what are some of the biggest issues you've seen in your day-to-day PT general population clients, movement-wise, that they're coming to you with troubles and you're noticing in their movement patterns that they should be doing better?
Well, again, this is something you'll be familiar with, but the Dr. Belisa one, but 99% of people don't know how to breathe. And if you're lucky in the sense that they don't know how to breathe, do they know how to breathe and stabilize at the same time? Because it's two different mechanisms, and it's kind of it's weird. It's like one of the most vital functions. You got your heartbeat, and you got getting oxygen into your body. It's pretty primal. It's pretty important, and because it's so important, your body will find a way of getting air into the body no matter what. So if you can't diaphragmatically breathe, which is the way you should, you'll then compensate through chest breathing, which obviously you know from the Dr. Belisa one, and the fact that you were good at it anyway. So yeah, breathing is one thing, but not just breathing in that sense, because of the way it affects the nervous system from a stress perspective, but also the ability to breathe in tandem with proper spinal stabilization, which is very, very difficult. And in DNS, there's something called the functional threshold, where you can reach your ability to tolerate a weight. But if you do that at 3 reps of a deadlift and your program calls for 5, how many times are you going to compensate and just get 5 reps because it's in your program? When deep down in reality, your ability to stabilize yourself properly has gone. You're fatigued. You've just hit that wall because there's a whole host of things that have gone on. So breathing is 100%, and the breathing impacts the hip mechanics. I would definitely say that, again, 80-90% of the people who come through the door shouldn't really be hip hinging immediately, just because of that's a real lucky guess. You're very, very, very fortunate if someone comes in, they have perfect hip mechanics and they can breathe properly. And the most common mistake I see people doing now is just accommodating a deadlift. So, right, okay, they can't deadlift from the floor, so let's get them deadlifting from a rack. And says, well, if you don't have spinal stability, changing the height's not going to do anything. They still can't control the spine. And when I was saying to you before about our online product, is that it's very meticulous, and I think that's probably what's put people off, is that now we actually have an online screening system where if I'm going to write a program for someone, I need to see them move. Like, they need to send me videos of them squatting with body weight, hip hinging with body weight, moving the shoulders around the body, looking at the posture. And then we need to address that before they even get to do the sexy stuff, which is the whole thing, the reborn to transform. It's like reborn is like the rebirth of your structure and doing things with proper foundations. And then once I've got them nailed, they go to Jay because he's a phenomenal transformation coach. But using an active example is that a guy who recently has done very, very well, he's lost a decent amount of weight in 13 weeks. He's 13 kilos down, which I suppose you can't complain with. First 6 weeks with him, we didn't go near compounds. It was step ups, it was bracing, it was hip hinging, but not having the load through his hands, having it in different angles, so it was safe. Teaching him about breathing and stabilization. And I went through this 6 to 8 week period with him, which was foundational work, not even pressing. He didn't do any form of pressing for the first 6 weeks because we worked on ability to move the scapula up and down. So to press, to elevate, to retract, to contract muscle tissue through safe ranges. We did all that. And now he can do the sexy stuff. He's getting up to nearly 100 kilos in each hand on farmers walks, and he's strong. He's squatting and deadlift with impeccable form. I'm not bothered about the weight. I'm just bothered about how it moves. And I think that the most exciting thing for me is that if you do these foundational stages well and you nail them, the potential to get that person strong and put muscle on is exponentially higher. But it's just a difficult thing. So yeah.
How are you relaying the breathing exercises through your online work?
Forums, so Facebook forums. So I'll do like because unless somebody's going to sit there and watch, I'll just do like a 90 seconds to 2 minute videos. Like, right, this is the expansion. This is do that. So it's internal, because obviously if you've got paying clients, you want them to see the value in paying. So that's why they do it. So I'll just talk to them through that mode.
What I mean is, what exercises are you getting people to do? Is it literally just teaching them how to diaphragmatically breathe? The old get into a 90-90 position with your legs and then like make sure the stomach's moving. Is it as simple as that, or are you doing something more complex?
No, it's not. It's not really complex, because it's like first of all, get the concept of diaphragmatically breathing, and then just basically say that it's got to be as mechanical as possible. And what you can be through program design is just put them into positions or select exercises where it's not going to be too demanding. So, I used to be of the notion like everybody needs squat and deadlift, blah, 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 and strength and conditioning. But honestly, now I would select a machine 9 times out of 10 in initial phases, because it's safer, because it's just a safer range of motion. They can't fall out of the plane of movement. But in terms of core exercises, and I'll say this time and time again, the kneeling plank is for me the one, because
the kneeling plank,
yeah, the actual the standard plank is far too demanding, in my opinion. And you think of it from a distance perspective, it's always going to load the lower back a lot more if you go into your toes. What I'll say with people, so I'll give you an active example, is that, right, go into a kneeling plank position. If they have an anterior tilt, which I can see in pictures, I'll say take yourself into a slight posterior tilt. So make the back longer, front shorter. So belly button, pelvis to belly button. So make that shorter, and make your lower back longer. Clamp down and breathe into it. And they don't do reps, they do breaths. Because, anybody can, if they're clinging on for dear life for 20, 30 seconds. And the funniest thing about the DNS course is, obviously you've seen Frontline, and they've made it even better when you guys are there. This gym with the most insane kit in Europe. And I went on a course which was fucking everyone up on there using their own body weight. And I mean, seriously, like, we were all shaking because they were putting us into the most, not disadvantage, not sorry, it wasn't, there was no disadvantage being there, but it was just showing you how well you could actually stabilize. And it was just a kneeling plank position. And it was just like, right, tuck into there. Now think of your core strangling your spine, hold that position, breathe into it, lock it in, and breathe. But breathe and expand as well at the same time, or at least use that Valsalva maneuver. And it's a kneeling plank is like, whoa, okay.
How could someone, have you got a simple test? Anyone who's listening right now can see if they're a good breather or not?
In terms of what core stability breathing?
Yeah,
or,
if they can do a diaphragmatic breath, or if they're chest breathing too much, what's the simple test they can do while they're listening to it?
Yeah, simple test is just hands on your. Well, first of all, it's awareness first. So just take a deep breath and see what moves. And if your chest goes up first, then it's for your chest. If your belly moves first, which is very rare nowadays, then it's diaphragmatic. And diaphragmatic, which basically means is that the reason why the belly goes forward is because the abdominals are actually eccentrically relaxing because they're getting out of the way, so the organs move forward to pull the diaphragm down, which is probably you will be aware of. You just lie on your back and just see where air wants to go, as daft as it sounds. Does it inflate your chest or does it inflate your belly? Knowing that you've done a proper movement through hip stabilization or core stabilization is it will feel ironclad. And you know that feeling when you pull a deadlift and you're like, that was just solid. Like it was mechanical. It was mechanical as possible. That's when you know you've got proper hip stabilization. There's no deviation, anything. It feels like more of a mechanical movement, not just trying to drag the weight up by any means.
Yeah. Earlier on, you mentioned that you went back to basics. You got rid of the belt. You went completely raw. A lot of people in the gym now, wear belts just because they think it's going to protect their lower back. What's going on with the belt? Why should people be wearing it? If they do, why shouldn't they be wearing it? When is it applicable?
Belts belts don't actually do nothing. Don't do anything at all to protect the back. Like they don't protect it. It's not really. If somebody says,
but there's always that thing, right? Hurt your back hurts, you put your belt on.
Yeah. No. It's common misconception. And like I say, one thing I'd like to point out though is like, there's nothing wrong with getting things wrong. I've done so much stupid shit which I'd rather talk about. It's not bad if you do it wrong. But just to clarify, if somebody has a bad back because of a movement or an exercise is giving them a bad back, putting a belt on is not doing anything. It's really not. It's so. And the reason why is that a belt is there as a cue for you to brace and expand your core into. And it's got to be like a 3D kind of, I don't want to use the activation because that's not the right word, but 3D expansion with intra-abdominal pressure. So if somebody tenses their abs, that's not actually a great idea because it's actually putting the spine into flexion. You need to be aware of all the muscles, lock into them, and expand so it kind of puts so much 3D pressure on the spine it can't move. That's intra-abdominal pressure. Now, when you do a belt, if you're going to use a belt properly, you probably want to put it on not as tight as possible, but pretty tight, and then breathe, and then like tense, and then breathe into everywhere. So breathe into your breathe into your obliques, breathe into your TVA or the side of your abdominals, breathe into your lower back. But then there's, if you want to I don't want to go too down the line, but then there's actually your inhalation has a massive impact on it. So whether you breathe in or out has a massive impact on your mechanics, which can get a bit technical. But if someone were to use a belt properly, they have to try and break the belt. They have to try, the belt buckle should be about to ping off. And if they do it right, the lift will feel effortless and totally different. The only thing is that the actual ability, your core will probably fatigue before your arms and legs. So
yeah, it's very hard. Breathing properly is very hard, and it's why it's hard to do compound lifts for high reps for that very reason. Yeah, because you've got to maintain stability for so long.
No, I don't mind saying this now because Dan Reeve does my programming now, and it's the week 5. Oh, is it week 4 or 5? No, it's week 5 of a squat program and a back squat. This is the first week I've gone over 100 kilos. Oh no, and that's like this is the first week I hit 100 kilos on a back squat. Yeah. Because this DNS, the concept of DNS, which I'm now aware of, I was using it, and for some reason Dan felt like a dick and gave me 6-second eccentrics. And if I'm going to do 6-second eccentrics, properly engage the core and the lower back, and not good morning it up and use my quads to get myself out of the movement, and do it honestly, it really strips it back. And this was the first time I think I got 100 for 6 and 100 for 5 because I'm doing it properly. But,
yeah, it's 50% of the weight.
Yeah, it's. Are
you big on pre-training rituals?
Like what first?
Like pre-set, before a massive squat set, massive deadlift set. Do you have certain rituals, certain things you do certain places you go to in your head? Anything crazy like that?
You know what?
Or are you quite mechanical about it?
No, the thing is now is that you periodize your business, you periodize your training, you periodize. The people have to plan and accept when they got to take things on the chin, due to like lifestyle commitments, due to workload. My training is literally like I get it in when I can. I make sure I compound lift 3 times a week. It lasts 45 minutes after I've warmed up properly. Got myself into the right state. Don't use coffee as a pre-workout apart from on like as a treat once a week. I don't have any pre-workout. Seldom use coffee. Don't have any music. Don't have my phone in there because I train in my garage. Don't have my phone with me. Use a pad and a stopwatch. That's the only thing I take in. So no music, no nothing, because I actually want to see now, like, if I properly take away every external stimulus, what am I going to do? And the reason being is that when if you go back only 2 years ago, I was the guy who was there like, right, everything has to be perfect. Let's take the best type of pre-workout. Let's have a really strong coffee. I had all the gear, no idea, the straps, the belt, the shoes, the chalk, and the angry music, psyching yourself up, being in that complete state of arousal, and then you'd get really, really amped up and lift the bar, and you'd be like, yeah. But the thing is that you've got so much stimulus going on, there's so much arousal there. It's like even if you weren't lifting correctly, you probably wouldn't be aware of it because you just bothered about, right, I need to lift whatever this weight is for as many reps as I could. And it was like...
So it's interesting. So you actually do have ritual. You're just very, very internalized with it.
Yeah, completely. It's like the most...
You're very almost meditating during the
kind of. The only thing... So in between sets, after speaking to the posturologist, I've got a board which I drew some numbers and dots on, and I just do... in between sets, I just probably roll the balls on my feet with a ball. If there's a muscle that doesn't feel like I'm quite connected to it, I'll just move it, not train it, but just move it, try and find that muscle better and connect with it. And then I'll just close one eye, track across the dots and close the other eye and do that. Because I did actually, whether it's placebo or not, I'm not sure, but I did actually notice a difference from that, like feeling more balanced. If you actually, her name's Annette Verpilot, and if you watch her stuff on YouTube, she's done a TED talk, and I've had people in stitches. Some people are like, oh my God, by showing them how imbalanced their eyes are. And then she was saying that an eye imbalance is one of the things that's going to lead to a muscular imbalance. But so that's what I do in between the training. It's very internalized. But I have to say, this is touch wood, and it's the most I've enjoyed training and the most injury free. Well, I don't want to say it because it is like jinxing it, but I've injury wise, everything's just nowhere near what it used to be. It's like 95% less niggles, aches, and pains, and it actually made me realize how many years I trained with constant pain, which I just trained around.
It's horrible, right?
Yeah. Like knee pain, shoulder pain, lower back. And you just thought it's a rite of passage as a bodybuilder or as a strong man. You're just like, everybody gets injured. I said, well, actually, if you're smart and don't have an ego, you don't have to. So,
then you start bragging about it.
Yeah. And then so all of a sudden, none of my lifts go on Instagram anymore. But it's more so that now, like we talk about that life periodization, is that when things do quieten down and I'm not as busy, because I am really pushing in lots of different areas right now. In 5 years' time, if I wanted to go back to competing, I'll thank myself for the foundations I laid now rather than training like I was. Because, I know for a fact that if I was to put a belt on or to put some lifting shoes on, because I actually squat barefoot as well now, it's like if I was to put some lifting shoes on, if I was to put a belt on, now I'd be pretty strong. But in 5 years' time of doing that completely raw and training this is me type of training, this is completely raw. 5 years of doing that and then adding the assistive equipment, you're probably going to be in a good state.
Amazing. One of the things I wanted to ask you, but I feel like the whole podcast has summed this up, is what have you changed your mind about most this year? But I don't know if there's anything to add to that. I think you've pretty much summed it up here. If anyone can listen to the first episode we did with Chris in one of the early numbers, which I'll link in the show notes, they could just tell a big difference.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think what it is like there's it's just the enjoyment. It's not taking yourself seriously. It's just enjoying it. Don't worry if you get things wrong. I think that the downside of social media is that people are petrified of being called out now or getting something wrong, when in reality it's not the worst thing in the world. I think it's bad when people try and exploit people and take the money. That's bad. But, if you put something up there, it's not right. So don't take yourself too seriously. Realize that it's not, that you can never, ever, ever stop learning. And you'll always, the way you do things now isn't the way you'll be doing things in 3 to 5 years or even next year. It's just not. Especially the people who want to grow, you'll always grow like that. And yeah, it just be more chilled out about it, really. It's a better approach. So
perfect. Let's finish up on some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. Squats or deadlifts?
Fucking hell. It's deadlift.
Dumbbells or barbells?
Barbell.
Strength or size?
Strength.
Mountains or beach?
Beach.
Writing or podcasts?
I really enjoy both. I guess I'm going to have to say writing.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd go with the same.
Yeah.
Who should be on the podcast next?
Who should you have on the podcast next?
Yeah.
It depends on your audience. That's a really tough one. In regards to what I know, it's rapid fire, but what angle? What do you think you've not covered? I'd say. Go on, you know the podcast. You could give us a suggestion. Go on. I really couldn't say in terms of your audience. It's difficult. I mean, I'm working on Jordan Shallow now, but he's been hard to track down. That's BPAC's chiropractor who he's touring with. But that's my personal preference. In terms of someone interesting, I'd love to see you, and I think you do have the capability to break someone who's more influential, from a media perspective. So maybe a comedian or someone more mainstream. For you, okay. I'd say aim high and get someone who's like a heavy hitter in the media, so you could I don't know, that would be pretty cool. I think the way yours is now is that and I'd say this to anybody who wants to a podcast, is just ask anyone. I literally fucking ask anyone. I don't care if they say no. But yeah, maybe going more into the mainstream with that. But in terms of an interesting people, even though I've had good guests on and continue to probably will have more good guests on, for me now I just chase the conversation. Like I'm going to ask a guy soon who's a world expert in autism. I want to speak to people who can speak about one thing for an hour, so they educate the audience on that thing. So in a really poorly quick fire answered question, just find the conversation that you haven't had yet and have that with the world leading expert in it.
Awesome. Any parting words?
No, just thanks for having me on. Even though I've got my own show, I do generally still see it as a privilege to be on other people's and to talk. So yeah, just thank you for having me on again.
Do you want to plug your show, your book, your website, etc.?
Yeah, I'd just say that the book I'm aiming for a release in late November, December. That's the preliminary goal. It might come out sooner. If it does, I'll be made up with that. It is more towards PTs, but if you're interested in any aspect of personal development, there is an element of that to it. In regards to my own services, it's more one-to-one. Obviously, I do have my online training services, but my one-to-one is something I still want to pursue. Like I do love training people one-to-one. It's just obviously going to be on a lesser volume of hours basis. And I'm pretty regular on Instagram. If you give us a follow, that it's just more about movement and longevity type of stuff now.
Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes. Highly recommend following Chris's stuff. Very, very smart. And always very thought-provoking. For more information, please visit www.rntfitness.com or follow us on social media at RNT_fitness. And if you enjoyed today's episode of Chris, please share it with your family and friends. Thanks for listening.